Hey guys, welcome to the 5,000 mile update video on my individual British Racing Green M3 Touring. I'm out here in the beautiful Alps on one of my absolute favourite roads, the Red Rock Road. I'm actually with my parents on an Alps adventure trip, but a bit more about that later. Before we jump in the car and get out this searing heat, I want to say a massive thanks to all of my subscribers, old and new. I gained a massive 7,000 new subscribers during the month of June. So welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoy the content moving forward. It's great to be back on the Red Rock Road. The last time I was here was the back end of last summer on the 1250 GS motorbike, and that was an incredible experience, although I seem to remember it was about 35 degrees, and I remember feeling like I was going to faint from heat exhaustion because I had full leathers, a helmet, etc. Thankfully today I'm in a beautifully air-conditioned cabin, and all the better for it. I've seen a lot of bikers out there, and although at points along the past week or so that we've been on the road, I have really wished that I was on a motorbike. Nothing beats air conditioning when it's over 30 degrees outside. For those of you that are new to the channel, well, I picked this M3 Touring up from Mr. Tony Lewis in February earlier this year, so 2024. I traded in my Dravit Grey M3 Touring, and I had that car for exactly a year. So my experience and seat time in the M3 Touring is pretty extensive. I've essentially owned or financed one for the past 18 months. Oh, tunnel. It's not the best sounding car in the world because, well, this one is still cluttered up with OPF filters, and it has to pass so many modern day regulations and rules. But I do have a Miltech rear axle back box, if you like, and it does enhance the sound a little bit. It definitely lets the car breathe a bit more and make it sound a little bit better. In the past 9 days, I've actually covered 2,000 miles in this car. Before I set off to the Alps with my parents, Lou and I ventured up to North Wales. It was a fantastic trip. Actually, we stayed at a good friend of mine's luxury cabins. I'll put a link in the description. They're called Ara cabins, and they're just beautiful. The perfect recipe to just escape and get away for a couple of nights. It was really wonderful. We took the M3 Touring there, and that was a 500-mile round trip. And then the very next day, I headed out to the Alps with my parents, and we've covered, up to this point, 1,500 mostly glorious miles. And I say mostly because the first day, well, it was pretty dull, sort of toll routes through France, and actually mostly rain. But thankfully, when we got down to the good stuff, the sun's come out and the weather has rewarded us. We even managed to catch a glimpse of one of the Tour de France stages, which was epic. And I got to meet one of my absolute heroes and idols, and someone I'm very fortunate to speak to on social media, Mr. Tom Pidcock, who also happens to be a massive petrol head. So Tom, if you're watching this, thanks once again for your time, literally minutes before the start of stage 5. And yeah, I hope that we can do something car related in the not too distant future. Definitely not bike related, because I feel that you might absolutely kick my ass in every way, shape and form. Look at this road. It just blows my mind. I love it. It's so picturesque. It's probably not the best dynamic driver's road because there's lots of niggly bits like this, but in terms of visuals, it's just stunning, isn't it? It really is absolutely beautiful. Before we talk about what this car has been like to live with for the past 5,000 miles and what I think the M3 Touring is all about from my time behind the wheel of 1 or 2, as it were, or 3 or 4 if you include press cars, I have to talk about some individual options that this particular car has got. The first one, we've already mentioned it in the intro, the individual British Racing Green paint. Stunning. It gets so many compliments, it's not even funny. I mean, the paint gets a compliment way before people realise it's an M3 Touring. And I think that speaks volumes. But, and there is a big but, as many of you might know, I'm not the best at keeping my cars clean or detailing my cars. And this is a very flat paint, and it shows up all marks and mud and spray and rain and hard water marks. It just shows up absolutely everything. And where we live, unfortunately, there's a couple of birds that regularly poo on cars, including mine if this is out of the garage, and they've just left stains, like bird lime stains all over the paint. There's hard water stains everywhere. And as I say, I'm definitely not good at detailing whatsoever, but cleaning this car the couple of times that I have, it's near impossible to get the paintwork back, and I think it needs a proper polish. And while we're on that, big shout out to Mike from Minutia Detailing, who did detail this car before I collected it from Tony and Berry BMW. It looked wonderful for the first few days, and then our dreadful winter continued, and obviously it hasn't really been in that condition since. So although I love this colour, it's definitely not one that I would look at speccing again on a future car, just down to maintenance and detailing. And the other option to talk about are these carbon buckets. As you'll know, if you've been subscribed for a while, I've had these seats now in 4 M3s and various other press cars, including the G81 M2 long-termer that I had last year. And one of the most regular questions I get asked when people are speccing their M2s, M3s and M4s are, should you go, or should they go for the carbon buckets, or should you stick with the M Sport seats, which are standard? And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. It's a bit like when people ask me, should I go for a manual M2 or should I go for an auto M2? Well, they both kind of tick different boxes and fit different situations, and that goes with these seats. I love them. When you're in them, they're amazing. We've just spent the past 5 or 6 days and probably minimum 8 hours on each day in the car, and that includes my 70-plus-year-old parents who have rotated and taken turns in this front passenger seat, and I've had nothing but praise from them and absolutely no complaints from me and my aging body. They are just fantastic. They are obviously massively supportive. They are very, very comfortable. These are heated as well, not that you're going to need that today, but they do a fantastic job. They also add some cabin space because they're so thin. When you've got passengers in the back, like I've had over the past week or so, they actually get more legroom because you've got the carbon buckets. But where they do fall a little bit short is the whole getting in and out process. You see these side bolsters definitely get in the way, and I'd say that's more of an issue in the M3 or the M3 Touring compared to, let's say, the M2 or the M4, because the M2 and the M4 have longer doors and therefore a slightly bigger space to navigate getting in and out of, whereas the M3, well, the doors are a bit shorter, and if you've got a lanky frame like me, it does make it tricky getting over the bolster and into the seat and reversing that when you get back out again. Not if you're using the car, I don't know, infrequently, but if you are using it as a daily, which I obviously use this most of the time because my M2 is now really more of a track car, well, it does become a little bit tiresome. But I wouldn't say it's the deal breaker. Definitely consider that before you tick the carbon bucket option, because as we know, they're definitely not cheap. Right, let's get on to talking about what this M3 Touring and my past M3 Touring has been like to live with. Well, I knew it was going to be a good car because I ran the saloon for a couple of years, and the Touring isn't too different. It does sound a little bit different from the driver's seat because you've got that big open space behind. You do get a bit more road noise, a bit more tyre noise, and it does feel a little bit more stiffly sprung, especially the rear axle, which would make sense because, well, it probably is. And when you're empty and it's just me in the car, you definitely do feel that sometimes skips around a bit on UK roads, not so much out here because the roads are fantastic. But what I've discovered on this trip is when you put 3 adults, i.e. me and my parents, and the kitchen sink in the boot, and I'm not exaggerating, we have brought so much luggage out with us because I'm actually meeting Lou tonight, who's flying out to Nice, and I've got a bag in there for her as well. So we've been pretty much fully loaded. And I tell you what, this car starts to make even more sense when you fully load it up. When you put weight in it and it sits into its travel a little bit, it just feels so good. A bit like when you take it out on track and you really push it to your own limits or the car's limits, everything starts to make a bit more sense. That slightly stiff ride suddenly becomes really amazing. And that is the case when you've got lots of weight, i.e. passengers and luggage in it as well. From the second we left the UK, we took the Eurotunnel, and big shout out to those guys, by the way. I've been on the Eurotunnel probably 4 or 5 times in the past 3 months. And each and every time, it's been completely seamless. They're really doing a good job down there. And little tip and trick, if you are taking a wide car like this or supercar, etc., onto it, make sure you book the tall carriage. And the way to do that is just state that you have a bike rack on the roof, and then you'll automatically go into the taller carriage. You do pay a little bit more, but it means that the carriage is not just taller, it's wider, and therefore you've got less chance of curbing your wheels. It's a really good little insider trick if you don't do it already. Anyway, back to getting my parents in this car. The second we hit a nice twisty road like this one, the car just felt amazing. I knew it would handle well, but I thought filling it up with people, and everything else, and all that added weight would blunt the car a little bit, and I wouldn't be having the fun that perhaps I thought I would normally if it was just me and a little bit of luggage. But the car didn't feel too different, to be honest. It really felt amazing. And the second we were off UK soil, well, the ride quality didn't become an issue. Not that it is a big issue in the UK, but like anything that has a performance edge, when you're back home in the UK on our terrible roads, the ride always tends to feel a little bit choppy, a little bit, I don't know, overly firm. But the second we hit French tarmac, well, this thing's felt like a 5 or even 7 series in many places. But seeing as my parents aren't in the car today and we've got this wonderful road, well, let's just push it a little bit and talk you through what I'm feeling. I mean, this platform, as we already know, is so stable. It's so planted. The massively wide Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres just always seem to find grip. They are so good, and they're even better when they're bolted onto a chassis like this. It's just mega. This is the same car that I've carted my parents around in for the past week or so. It's unreal. It's definitely no one-trick pony. Oh my goodness. It never gets old. It never fails to amaze me. It really is mind-blowingly good. Oh, this road's got undulations and bumps all over it, but yeah, it just deals with all of it so well. Of course, I've got all the settings in the world. I'm actually in sports in terms of suspension, 4-wheel drive sport in terms of drivetrain. all the traction and stability switched off. Oh my goodness gracious me, this car is just ridiculous. I mean, if I was doing this in a two-door M2, I would be impressed. But the fact I'm doing it in a really practical M3 Touring, wow. Well, I better slow the pace down because there are some cyclists out here, motorbikes, pedestrians, etc. But I had to have a little bit of fun whilst everyone else is having lunch. That's what happens out here in France. Early mornings, nobody's around. Late in the day, so early and late evenings, no one's on the road. And between, say, 12 and about 2 p.m, no one's on the road because they're all having lunch. Because if you don't find anywhere to eat during those hours, then you can sometimes get a little bit stuck. Anyway, we need to talk about the S58 engine that's in this car. It's a 3-litre inline-six twin turbo. On paper, at least, it produces a lot of power, 510 horsepower, and a fair amount of torque, 650 newton meter torque. But in reality, all of that is available, but it's available higher up in the rev range, which means when you have something like, especially the M3 Touring or the M4 Cab, which both weigh very close to 2 tons, well, you see, the S58 does struggle down low. And I've talked about this loads. In fact, I talked about it with my original rear-wheel drive M3 back in 2021. I'll demonstrate that now. Put it into fourth. We're actually at 2,100 RPM here. I will put my foot down now. There's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing. And then it starts to pull quite hard. And some would argue that that's what you want in your M engine. It kind of goes back to the old NA days where you haven't got much or anything down low. You need to rev it out, and that is rewarding when you're pushing on, but it does occasionally catch you out, especially when the car is fully laden. You're going up a mountain pass. Even second gear corners, well, they need to be first gear corners, because if this is below about 2,500 RPM, there really is not much available torque there, especially when you factor in altitude, etc., and extra weight, as we talked about. So that's my only negative around the engine. Also, the fact that it's not that frugal. I mean, the best we've seen is about 29 miles to the gallon, and that's sitting at about 85 miles an hour on the French toll route. Big shout out to MMR Performance, who sent me some, you can only call it jewelry, for my engine bay. I've already got my wonderful E-Venturi carbon air intake in there and my Hexon carbon engine brace, but MMR have sent me out some lovely machined aluminium caps to replace the fairly ordinary plastic looking one, so like the oil filler cap and the coolant caps, and now the engine bay is complete. It definitely looks like $1 million. Unfortunately, 99% of the time you can't see it, but just knowing that those lovely accessories are in there, well, yeah, happy days. So big shout out to those guys. Check them out. I'll put a link to their Instagram below so you can see what else they do. Recently, BMW launched the facelifted M3 and M3 Touring, and a lot of people naturally have asked me if I'm getting one. First step is to get my hands on a press car and see what they're like. Bit of extra power, and they've played around with a few bits and pieces. But unfortunately, like so many cars out there, they've once again gone up in price, and the standard spec levels, to my understanding, have come down, and that's a little bit cheeky. But obviously, I've always got my eye on something new, because this car is a channel car, and as you know, they only tend to hang around for about a year. And Mr. Tony Lewis would be very upset if he didn't get another sale out of me every single 12 months. I say that jokingly. Tony is so good to me. He looks after me so well, as to Berry BMW. That's the reason that I am so loyal with those guys. And if you're looking for a new BMW for yourself, especially a punchy one, He doesn't deal with all of them, but he'll be able to put you in touch with people that do. Then drop him a line. There'll be a link to Tony Lewis in the description below. I'm going to finish the video here because I need to get back to the hotel and my parents. It's about an hour away. Hopefully you've really enjoyed this. Big shout out to everyone who has stopped to say hi in the few hours that I've been on the Red Rock Road. I've bumped into a number of lovely English guys and girls that are on road trips and rallies. And I bumped into the Car Passion Events guys who are from Belgium and the Netherlands in a couple of lovely BMWs, M2 competitions, fully modified, and a lovely E92. And those guys are actually responsible for some of the lovely tracking shots that you've probably seen throughout this video. So big shout out to them. Thanks a lot. And yeah, it was awesome to meet you all. Hopefully bump into you again very soon. Until the next one, guys, take it easy. Thanks again for tuning in. And thanks to all of you, old and new, for subscribing to the channel. Makes such a massive difference. I'll see you very soon. Cheers.